Okay, everybody, this is my spoiler review of From Season 3, Episode 6. Before I jump into this review, hit that sub button. It helps in so many ways you have no idea. So I'm going to break this review down to a bunch of parts, 4 different characters in the episode because it's very separated with Boyd kind of just floating around everyone's stories. So we're going to go that way. So let's start with everything going on with Jim and Tabitha and also Kenny. The episode starts with Tabitha and Jim, and they have this all-out fight here. Tabitha's still being hard on herself about feeling like she didn't do enough when she was gone. And when Jim tries to comfort her, they start fighting. I love when he points his finger at her and she just slaps his hand away. That was great. But then it gets to the part about the old wounds they both have with Thomas, who they lost. And Tabitha brings up how he's complaining about watching the kids alone for a week. But she's like, I watched him for a year while he wasn't around. So it really triggers this all-out brawl. But Julie overhears it. And there's a weird thing about it where she kind of can feel some gratitude that things seem back to normal now with their parents fighting. And then Tabitha and Donna actually comfort each other. And I love what Donna says to Tabitha, that her kids thought she was dead. She's like, see Dale down there? That could have been you down there. Don't try to be a hero. Go spend time with your kids. Don't take that for granted, which is a really good message. Probably the best thing Tabitha needed to hear. Now, Kenny continues his streak of sentimental scenes where he looks for his mom's old screwdriver and sees Julie smoking pot outside. And she says that Jim probably moved it out of the junk drawer. And that's the scene. And Kenny being a little upset about it. It triggers him to want to even more realize that this is a better house for his family. That's what his mom would have wanted him to leave. But every single scene with Kenny in this show is sentimental, and I'm getting really sick of it. Like, he needs an intense scene, an intense moment. And these are all scenes you probably can throw away. There's a lot of throwaway scenes to me in this episode, which was a big problem for me in pacing. And that even happens here when Tabitha's comforting Ethan about the fight she had with Jim. It just drags on scenes like this in this episode. It felt like from season 2. And then she sees the Ankui kids upstairs, but there's no real payoff for that in this episode. I hope there'll be something soon because we've seen that before. So it's reaffirming she's still seeing the kids, but again, it's a lot of padding in this episode. I also like when Kenny asks Donna if she's got extra space at the colony house now. Of course, it's in front of where poor Dale died. So of course there's a new spot open. Now let's shift over to Jade because that will also tie in with Tabitha at the end. Now Jade is trying to explain his theories to Boyd. When he brings up his thoughts about the bottle tree, Boyd reveals to him there's another bottle tree that him and Sarah found, but it's not one you can teleport through. But that bottle tree had a number, he said, 1864, just like the number on Jade's tree. Now 1864, if we're looking at it in terms of year, was Lincoln's re-election, and it was during the Civil War, so we know that he's seen Civil War soldiers before, so there's definitely a connection there. It's also the Sand Creek Massacre, so that's when Colorado volunteers led by Colonel John Chivington murdered at least 400 Native Americans, so there is a whole connection going on with that year and why that year could be important to both trees and him seeing Civil War people. How far does this from town go and how does it all connect? That's the big question. And when Jade goes to the second tree, he sees Tom the bartender, and he sees visions a lot like Boyd does. There's these characters that they seem mischievous, like when Boyd sees the priest, but then they end saying something that actually helps them. So I always wonder about these type of visions and if they're actually more good than bad. I like the line Tom says that was written really well. It's like ironic, a drunk looking for answers in a tree filled with bottles, but he really plays devil advocate to Jade, and he's like, it's probably something someone made because they thought it meant something, someone like you. But he actually gives him good advice at this point when he says to sober up and tap into that guy who started a business no one believed in. So this is a warning to Jade to not lose his mind over these theories and really focus also on the problems he's had with himself with the drinking and get his head on straight and looking more at nature than actually looking and trusting someone else who could be not trustworthy in how they went about things like hanging these bottles on these trees. Now Tabitha will bring Ethan to Jade, which I really like seeing Ethan being put with Jade because Ethan's really had nothing to do this season, and this is something that is a perfect spot for him to be someone who'd be obsessed with this puzzle like Jade is and can actually help him. And we learned that the second tree also had the same numbers, but they're in different spots. And the second tree, it's written in cursive, which I thought was interesting. And this makes me wonder how far back again too, because back in the day they wrote way more in cursive, so this is just something that can go as far back as the Civil War. Now, where we get the first big interesting reveal of this episode, which I will give this episode in a positive note, is the reveals they had at the end were satisfying. It's just a lot of waiting to get there in this one, but Tabitha sees the drawings Jade has of these scarecrow people, and it triggers her because she's seen these in her nightmares as a child. So we get to see little Tabitha there and the 3 red stones in the circle. So it connects that Jade saw those 3 red stones in a circle. So they know they've seen the same thing. And she says in those nightmares, she saw this place too. I just didn't know. So really wild that is something that's connecting Tabitha to this whole story and how she's such an important character like Boyd, like really Boyd and Tabitha. And I would say Victor, the 3 that are going to really connect all the dots to what's really going on. So I did really like that ending scene. Now, everything with Victor and Henry notices that Victor has this kid's car. And Victor explains a woman bought it for her sick son, but then she hit the tree. She entered Fromville. She died a while ago, he said, and the son probably is dead too. Now, when you hear that kind of line, the son's probably dead, he's probably not dead then. So I'm sure that might be a character that comes up later on, or someone they learn about in all these drawings or anywhere really. But that can't just be a throwaway kind of moment there about that character dying, trying to give her sick son joy, and then landing in Fromville. So we'll see. But Henry tells Victor he's coming with him to the cave to get Jasper. So I'm happy they went already to go get Jasper. They didn't kind of hold that hanging for the rest of the season. It is interesting though that it kind of just shoves Sarah to the side, like Sarah wasn't even invited. Victor is like, I'm going with Dad now. But they find the treasure room for the creatures here, and Henry is totally spooked by seeing Miranda's scarf there, but they find Jasper, which is the most important part. And Victor then shows Henry his trailer, and Henry is heartbroken when he tells him that he would hide there alone. But that's where Victor tries to comfort him. He's like, they have Jasper now. He's like, we'll be able to save people now. He knows things. He says, I heard him tell Christopher a story about this place, and we have to make him tell it again. But I love Henry's reaction, how the actor delivers it. He's like, Victor, that's a toy. So he's just like trying to take everything in. He just saw the creatures face to face. He's seeing his wife's scarf, and now his son is telling him the comfort and the hope is a toy. But all that Jasper stuff gets me really excited. But adding to the slower pace of this episode, it felt like it really, at the end of the day, the story for Victor and Henry here is that they got Jasper. That's it. So there's not much moving ahead. It's a slower clip again. Now, let's jump to everything with Marielle, Christy, Fatima, Randall, Ellis, that whole group. A perfect throwaway scene I'll give you an example of that could just be a deleted scene. I don't know why they pad these episodes like this, but they literally, in the beginning of the episode, show Kenny hand Marielle the stuff from the ambulance. We know the ambulance is there in the town. We know that there's an ultrasound that's going to be brought up. They could have just said that. Do we have to see Kenny actually hand that to Marielle? I know I'm nitpicking, but I do think these really affect the pace in these episodes. You feel it subconsciously, and that's a big editing problem. Now, Boyd, we see still visiting Randall. He's still trying to work through that guilt. It's still plaguing him. And Christy's the one who tells Boyd there's an ultrasound. So then Boyd will visit Ellis and Fatima, and they fill him in on Fatima's cravings, and he fills them in on the ultrasound. And poor Boyd, when he steps out, is probably crushed, thinking, great, now I got a demon grandchild. Like, everything to stack on for Boyd here. And staying on that, the ultrasound, when they do it, there's no baby, so it's very tragic. And Ellis is like, you need to tell them, telling Fatima, you have to tell them about these cravings now, what is really going on with you, especially because these are 2 nurses you're seeing in front of you that want to help you. And we get a great reveal tied to this where Elgin looks at a photo of Fatima he took. I called it that when you bring those cameras into shows like this, there's always a ghost in one of the photos, but you see it's the kimono woman in the picture with Fatima, and she says, help me, Elgin, I can save you, I can save all of you, I can help you, you go back home. It's someone who clearly wants to help him, and someone who's been through a lot. So we saw us in the picture of Fatima. We know that there's a lot of theories that think the kimono woman is Fatima, and now we know she doesn't have a baby. So maybe this feeling she started getting these cravings is her just slowly transforming into this figure she'll eventually get to. Why is she in a kimono? Maybe she travels through a tree. She ends up somewhere that is in a different country. Who knows? But I really think that has got to be one of the most accurate theories so far. It just happens to be her in the picture with Fatima. So that's really intriguing and enticing and was probably my favorite moment of the episode. Now, you can also think too, did she ever have a baby really in there? Did the baby die? Did something destroy her baby? Who knows, but I'm sure we'll get that explained. Now, with Marielle, when she comes to check on Randall in the beginning, of course, the first thing he says is, "What the F you want?" This is a nurse helping him, she doesn't have to do this. This is why Randall could be so frustrating. But we get to see his scars as he does for the first time. But Randall gets to talk to Marielle about what happened to him and Julie last season, them being possessed. He's like, "Why are you pretending you're okay?" He's like, "What if it's not over?" And she's in a denial phase of it, Marielle, and he can see that. But then he talks about being alone in the bus and how it can be terrifying. So Marielle offers him a spot in the clinic, which I think will make his story more interesting, being there with Fatima and Christy, but I wonder how quickly he'll drive them insane. But maybe the pot will help Randall, because when Randall runs into Julie, she says getting stoned has been helping her with what they went through. So maybe that will be the change that Randall really needs. But overall, I'm giving this episode a 7.1. It was my least favorite of the season. By far, it felt like the pace of season 2 again. So it was disappointing in that sense, because it really dragged getting to those big reveals at the end, and I just felt like this show has been taking so many steps forward, and this was a huge step back. But this is one episode. This is a 10 episode season, so I hope it gets back to that better pace this whole season's had the next episode. And it's still stuff I'm very intrigued about and excited about, but I feel like this was just really a lot of padding here. So let me know what you thought of it down below. I love to hear your thoughts. I read every comment, try to respond as many as I can. Hit that sub button so you miss one of my reviews of From. I'm also reviewing Penguin at the moment and do celebrity interviews, and I'll see you next time.